Linda, could you please give the invocation?
Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we invite your presence as those that are gathered here make decisions that affect the lives of the people of our community. We thank you that even though funding in different areas are a problem at this time or lacking at this time, that your word says that you will provide for all of our need according to your riches and glory. We thank you that even though the road ahead looks rough, that you will make a way where there seems to be no way. We thank you that nothing is impossible with you. We call on your wisdom, knowledge, understanding, might, and revelation tonight, and release your blessing over this council and the inhabitants of this community. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Linda. So now that it is 6:05, we'll officially call this committee of the whole meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman,
Here.
McClanathan,
Here.
Ross is absent, Parker,
Here.
Busker is absent, Brashaw,
Here.
Mysick,
Here.
and Berberay is absent.
And if you could please stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Alderman Borneman. And Alderman Borneman, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So we will move on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved. Second.
Parker makes the motion, is seconded by Mysick. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda approved. Approval, item 5, approval of minutes from the Committee of Whole meeting held on September 14th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so a motion by Bradshaw, seconded by Mysick. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I would approve that as well, so that is approved. Are there any public comments? Item 6. All right, so we're going to move on from that to item 7. So we are at item 7, Greater Freeport Partnership Quarterly Presentation presented by Mark Williams. Good evening, Mr. Williams. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. May I? All right, thank you. Is this coming through okay?
Mhm.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your support of the Greater Freeport Partnership. We certainly appreciate that. And this happens to be my first full quarter, so you should be receiving tonight or tomorrow our quarterly report digitally sent to you. But and I kind of try to be brief, but we did cover a lot of area this last quarter. And from the industrial sector, let me say that there's a lot of significant development going on in and around in the county and the value-added industries, value-added ag, and particularly in the cheese and dairy. Significant investments, employment. They happen to employ a lot of people who live in Freeport that commute to these locations. The important part is that the paychecks come back to Freeport and are circulating in businesses. And so our effort to improve the business climate in here is important as well. So the connection to the outside of Freeport in the county is important to the growth and support of the businesses here. And that's where you'll start to see me draw that connection through this. And Millrace Crossing, there's some efforts we have a few sites for vertical development offering for marketing for new industrial or even expanding industries looking for new sites. And so Millrace Crossing is one. We facilitated a meeting with the City of Freeport staff, Stevens County staff, along with engineering consultant to move discussions forward on looking at developing cooperative efforts of extending water and sewer infrastructure to Millrace Crossing. We are currently meeting, and I'm currently meeting actively with national developers to bring them, that would bring with them relationships with companies, businesses, as well as business clients and rail users. There is a downtown focus that I've been working on this past quarter. Starting, we've been inventorying redevelopment opportunities within the downtown Freeport, along with cost reduction tools, I call them, or incentives, but a way of lowering the cost of their investment in doing business. This is what we're looking at. Available for each building and site. We've begun that. We've begun meeting with developers experienced in large redevelopment and adaptive reuse projects that utilize the tools that are available to us. Those come with experience. Commercial, we continue to meet with and provide information to owners and representatives and brokers of large retail centers in Freeport. Retain current retail operations and fill vacant spaces. There's still movement on those, just more in discussion point. Obviously, there's one, development agreements that the city's working on right now with a large vacant retail center, but we will continue to work in that regard too. As we move in public sector partners, we do hold weekly meetings with the city manager in Freeport, community development director, and also as well the community development director and the public works director as well, and meet kind of regularly to try to provide support when needed. We participated as a board member of the Workforce Connection Board, as well as the Quad City Redevelopment Regional Economic Development Authority meeting, which actually provides another source of funding or bonding funding for pooled bonds or resources that may be useful down the road for the city or other development. Another one that we're focusing on, I mentioned it before, as we're coming out of COVID, there's no, regardless of where the place of business is going to be, whether or not the business has to be a discontinuous business or a continuous business to improve themselves, there's an effort of moving and pivoting in some direction. There is also a need for entrepreneurship and innovation support system here. So what I had mentioned before, my last time talking to you, is working on this innovation ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem map, where the resources that we have existing and what we don't have, we basically bridge regionally. And what we don't have regionally, we will virtually bring in. And so many of those efforts are underway. The mapping is done to a degree to what we have here. What we had in Rockford before I came here was one that existed, a little bit more robust, had more players, services in that. We're not trying to duplicate those efforts, but if they're available to be bridged this way, we would. What we're also finding, and we've had good meetings with the library, as well as coordinated a meeting with the library and as well as the Rockford Library System too, to see, because they are an entry point to this, where the Small Business Development Center is also a place where small businesses want to go get resources and how to start a business, to develop a business plan. But I think it's an unknown to the large public of the resources that a library brings. And one is that they're low barrier of entry, they're open late in the evenings, you can do it online, there's a robust system for them to connect to. We want to help expand that service. And in doing that, that opens the door for those of women and minority-owned businesses as well that need to have access to these tools. And so we're working to move that along. In addition to that, we're in the process of working regionally on a strategic doing process regionally, and Greater Freeport Partnership is a significant portion of that. And I think the strategic doing, there is a framing question, and basically it says, imagine if we're a globally recognized hub for aspiring entrepreneurs and innovative companies, what would it look like? So we're breaking that down into areas. We have teams set up, a narrative team for branding and stories, brain power, research and talent, support networks of startups and innovation. That's what I'm talking about with this ecosystem, as well as quality places. And that gets into connected spaces and policies that may be adaptive to creating that environment where innovators and entrepreneurs want to be in. And some of that has to do with connected places. You're already working on the corridors in your downtown. Those are important connections to places where co-working spaces can be set up when we're looking at redevelopment with some of our redevelopment folks. We are looking at all these things from a big picture. Along with that, starting is the commuter rail, but passenger rail. Right now, passenger rail from Chicago to Rockford is already, the feasibility study's done. They're actually hired a manager, IDOT, to move that along. We had our first meeting today with the region from Rockford to Dubuque to look at the RFP that's going to be issued. We started the process of meeting. We're having another meeting to kind of go further onto that once the agreement is developed between IDOT and the players involved, including Black Hawk Hills and R1 and Rockford, to look at the feasibility to bringing passenger rail through Freeport, stop in Freeport, and on through Stevenson County into Dubuque. Along with that, so there are some quality of life issues there tied to that, and I'm not going to go into deep detail here, but that is part of that strategic doing process. Workforce development, we continue to work. We actually have started the formation of a workforce development committee. Glad to say that Chris Kaburski, president of HCC, has agreed to chair that committee. We're forming that team right now to start looking at filling that pipeline of needed workforce that our employers need into the future. I want to say from economic development and entrepreneur, continuing on the small business development, the partnership welcomed 10 new small businesses this past quarter to the area. Ribbon cuttings were held at Exchange Street Printery, Melissa Schwartz Thomas State Farm, Brooks Bark and Recreation, Sweet Lily's Baby Boutique, Bargain Max, Accurate Art and Framing, Barrel and Brie, Unishippers, Port Tubing, and Healthcare Plus. There's several more, I think, coming up the next couple weeks. We started those ribbon cuttings and notifications back in July. I think we started those. And so you're starting to see there is activity, throughout this shutdown or mitigation period, that the businesses are opening up new businesses. We know there's strain out there, but we encourage them, providing them information on how to work through COVID by doing best practices, providing webinars, information that's going out, providing assistance when they're trying to apply for grants through the BIG grant program or any other grant programs that are out there. For property development and redevelopment incentive tools, Enterprise Zone is one of those. Enterprise Zone is also an area that we're trying to free up space for future expansions of the boundary because we're at capacity. There's 15 square miles that are permitted by state statute because of the units of governments we have in place. And we're near that 15 square miles. So there are some areas within that zone that are in the floodway and will not be developed. So we're looking at those areas to take those areas out of the enterprise zone to free up space. We met with the city, in the county, other municipalities that are in units of government that are designated units of government. The next steps in that will be us, the enterprise zone board saying, okay, go forward with this process of deletion, and we will be in front of you as a unit of government, designated unit of government, to make those amendments to the designated ordinance and the intergovernmental agreement that you have. That's in the future, a couple months down the road, but just knowing that that's coming. There's a program right now to help reduce costs of redevelopment. It's a really good program for redevelopment processes, and the county has to adopt a resolution. It was a lot. Statutory authority was given to the county by the state in 2018. It's called the CPACE program. It's a commercial property assessed clean energy program. And this program is used to finance structures in which building owners borrow money for energy efficiency and renewable energy qualified projects. Basically, there's an assessment placed on that property, like a special assessment, and that fund, that special property tax tied to that special assessment, goes to pay off a low interest funding to help pay for some of this energy efficiency funding, which is somehow can blend down more like a mezzanine financing replacement, so it can actually reduce the cost of redevelopment of some of the buildings that you have here. Statewide, there's probably 12 counties that are adopted this. We would be the 12th or 13th. Ogle County did it. The first ones were DuPage County, and Kane County. And so we're looking at, the county's already gone through the process to approve it at their Planning and Development Committee meeting, and I think it goes to council soon. So after they approve it, we'll start the application process, and so buildings in Freeport will be eligible for that. New construction as well as redevelopment. And let's see, Downtown Revitalization Loan Fund. We continue to meet with building owners that are interested in redevelopment and that. Business, can provide business education opportunities to local businesses. We've held a young professionals network golf outing. COVID-19 responses, I think you're pretty much familiar with our continue to promote the Freeport Clean Hands and Open Doors website program. Our health campaign to instill customer confidence. And we provide daily updates on COVID-19 financial resources and reopening information, as well as current meetings with DCO and state offices to see what programs are coming down the pipe, deadlines that are out there. We had calls today again with some companies interested in the BIG program. Marketing and tourism. The new Stevenson County or Freeport Tourism Brand Campaign, All In, was launched on social media on July 10th. This brand new will highlight the best in visual content and tell stories of Freeport and Stevenson County to all of its assets. Last year, Digital Bikes and Brews campaign was revamped and launched to the all-new tourism brand pages, All In, and the first week of the brand doubled the traffic to our website. Also, website visitors are spending an average of 6.5 minutes on each site, which gives us more exposure to people, and that's a part of the marketing towards this targeted marketing. Created billboards in southern Wisconsin. I don't know if you've seen it coming back in Monroe, in Janesville, featuring the bikes and Jane Addams Trail, along with tagline, experiences made, make memories, and again, continue to work with the paths and the importance of bike paths and drawing tourism dollars into our areas, particularly during this COVID period, because they are using the outside assets and getting back into nature, and they can stay socially distanced and stay exercised. Events, all of our events in 2020 were canceled or drastically modified. We had all three music on the Chicago events were virtually featuring local musicians. We did hold the partnership golf outing. Our cruise only night was a great success on August 15th. Over 1,200 people watched, between 250 to 300 cars on the expanded route, basically significantly lower than what it usually is, but we did go through a modified version of it. After consulting with the Stevenson County Health Department as of last week, my Mistletoe Walk will proceed as usual on November 22nd. And more information on that. You'll see continue to create County Digital Weekly Events Guide. And our new partnership, new website design has been finalized. All previous content has been reviewed and rewritten, and so that should be launched fully, hopefully soon. And we hired content creators in photo and video specific locations and industries in Freeport. So part of that is meeting with some of our local industries in Freeport, manufacturing companies, and getting videos within the manufacturing companies and interviews talking about the products that are made here. And getting out about, we make these products in Freeport, we want people to know that. And we want people to start to recruit people to come here to know that these products are made here. And so as I meet with the companies, we're trying to set that time up to come and do videos and take information off of their website if they allow us to put it on ours to showcase that. We're also going to be meeting with certain employers that employ people that have come back to Freeport to work. So that's an important comeback campaign. So from we've seen the Freeport Reflections, the grant that's been underway. The Streetscape Furniture Grant was awarded at the end of 2019. However, we didn't really, the 6 new park benches and 15 litter receptacles, and thank you to the city's Public Works Department for help to the installation, location, and removal of the old furniture. That's going through downtown. 2020 goals, 60 street Cape banners were designed and hung throughout downtown. Banners will remain up through Christmas. Decorations are installed in November. The collaboration between the City of Freeport, Downtown Freeport Events, and the partnership paid for the purchase of plants and ongoing maintenance through the summer months. Corridor beautification, the partnership is, we're analyzing partial data, vacancies and zoning, working with Community Development Director, redevelopment potential along Adams Street corridor. We're having ongoing meetings, again, with the Community Development Director to share information and coordinate efforts. We continue to work along with our efforts with the City of Freeport. It's a broad brass because of all the agencies we range of efforts because of the broad agencies that we merged together. So know that there's a lot more in the report. I didn't want to read it to you in whole, but know that we're this last quarter we're pushing the needle.
Yeah, you covered a lot of stuff there. Any questions from council?
Chair,
Sally?
I
or
have a
Ms.
few.
Bradshaw?
Thank you. Director Williams, with great interest, I was listening to you explain the C-PAGE program, the Clean Energy Program for businesses. Can you give a specific example of how a business could qualify, specifically what they would need to do to participate in this program?
Thank you. It's a good question. And this is, the education of this continues to roll out, but if it's an energy efficiency, HVAC, I would say, is one, right? You're going to make, or lighting, energy efficiency investments that you have to put into a building. There are funding mechanisms out there, even through the Illinois Finance Authority. They provide funding and capital. It's basically, you get a special assessment attached to your property. It stays with the property. That means if you sell it, that special assessment stays with the property. And the assessment tied to that, collected by the county. There is a small fee that the county collects on that. There's no cost to the county in that regard, but they are billed, the property owners billed, and it pays back that debt. And so, but you get it at a lower interest rate, so it can actually, as you stack the redevelopment cost, it can lower your cost of financing to redevelop a piece of property and is paying for energy efficiency. You know, I thought then maybe some of that could be tied also to HVAC and air purification, circulation as we reopen buildings, but that's not clear on that yet. But there is some opportunities. It's not for public build, you know, it's for private development. So the one public buildings would not be eligible use of that.
Follow?
Private, because no pay
Please.
property tax.
Go ahead.
Well, I thank you for that information.
You're
It
welcome.
sounds like a wonderful program. I also was glad to hear about your innovation ecosystem in the expansion in that. Hopefully you'll have a little bit more about that in the report that you will send to us. I guess that was more of a statement, not a question. And one more item, if I may continue.
Yes,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to thank you quickly for your contributing remarks specifically to the success of cruise night. And I had a little joke. I was kind of an involuntary participant in this. I had a last-minute house showing, and I had to get from point A in Freeport to point B. So I got to cruise, and everyone was waving at me. They were so friendly, and they were so impressed by my 2011 Ford Escape. I mean, I'm sure I was the talk of cruise night. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. McClanahan, you have some?
Thank you. Early on, you talked about the water and sewer access feasibility study. Are we pretty early in the process of that?
Absolutely.
All right.
It was just initial discussions and seeing where we were in the past and where we are now.
Sure.
And understanding that a developer, you know, at the same time I'm trying to recruit a developer to come in and develop that site, which generates a funding mechanism.
There you go. That's what I was going to be getting you down the road, but I
And there's-
figured not for tonight, so. okay.
Yeah, I can go, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit
Understood.
hole until
Yep.
we just started the process, but just to know that that is something that we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple questions of my own. The passenger rail from Chicago to Rockford, you said the feasibility study has been completed?
Yes, sir.
What's the status of that project?
They hired a manager right now, IDOT has, is my understanding, that they're managing, that's actually, there's a funding in place to actually make the improvements. They're far along and farther advanced than what we are, certainly on this leg, but it's moving.
And what is the step to make sure that if there's development west of Rockford, that Freeport is included?
This is the group that just met today, and I know there was an EMA meeting today, and I know City Manager Bucas sits on that as well as the county representatives. Black Hawk Hills is on there as well. We're on there. And so, you know, certainly Focus is going to make sure that you're getting clear understanding of where it's moving, and I'll work with Randy on whatever we need to do.
Great.
City Manager Bucas.
There's the Workforce Development Committee. You said that it was just put together?
Actually, it was probably formed a year ago. It became inactive for a while, and then we're getting it started again. I think Tim Hood chaired it last time. There's a change in president at the college, and I came in. We're trying to get that reconnected, and so Kim, the new president of HCC, is going to chair that. We're forming the committee right now. Of those interests, please give me a call. We're looking at existing industries as well. It's important to have that, and you know, we're forming that now. And obviously Freeport School District. So we're looking at the academies and the programs and the pipelines that we're going to fill. What the employers need is the most important part.
You mentioned, well, several things, but one thing I don't know if this is a focus of the partnership is just transportation for the typical resident here in the city. We have Pretzel City Transit, but I'm thinking more of something like Uber or similar to that. What would be the steps to bring more drivers to Freeport, and is that something the partnership could be tasked with?
We could certainly, you know, depending on what you desire to have us look at, you know, we do work for you, but we can certainly look at it. I mean, it's really, I think the city council would have certainly a view on any service. I think there's probably an agreement you would go through with like an Uber, or not to say names of those types of companies, but taxis or.
Right. Well, it's my understanding that there are those services in place, and it's kind of on whether the driver chooses to operate in this city versus in another city. So I think part of that is the advertising side of it, and that's why I bring it up to the partnership. Is that anything that you have had discussions with? Sounds like no.
I have not. Not for here. No, I have not.
Are you familiar with the company in other jurisdictions?
Yes, I am.
Where?
Rockford. I mean, when Uber came in, mass transit districts, and we did it, not much in Freeport. I remember Belvedere. We didn't do them a whole lot, but I'm familiar with the programs.
Okay.
Biking, bicycling programs. We did biking. I didn't administer the programs in Rockford, but I'm certainly familiar with them.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions? Well, hearing none, I appreciate your time. Thank you for your presentation and
Thank you.
the work your
bet.
department is doing. With that, we will move from item 7 to item 8. This is a Freeport Housing Authority monthly report presented by Babette Jamison-Varner. Ms. Jamison-Varner, good evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening. And as always, I really do appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to provide you with an update of the status of the Freeport Housing Authority. Tonight, I just wanted to kind of focus on just a few things, some of the things that have been happening that right now are our top priority. We have been talking about our tenant protection vouchers that go along with the demolition application on AMP1 Parkside that's located in the floodway. My greatest hope tonight was that I would be able to tell you about a press release that we're putting out about receiving the vouchers, but it looks as though, as of today, we still have a few more weeks before we'll receive those vouchers. What I do know right now, and as I've mentioned to you before, we did get word that we had the certificate of approval, and I believe that was probably back in maybe June or July. The Special Applications Office asked us to do a few more things. One of the last tasks that they asked for us to do was an assessment of the structures, the actual buildings over at Parkside, which we did complete the appraisal, and the results were that they were of a zero market value. So with that information submitted to HUD, again, we're looking at another couple of weeks. I did have a conversation with the field office today, and they did express the possibility of them requesting an emergency release of those vouchers. So again, we're looking at no longer than 2 weeks, maybe even sooner. But again, the last thing that we are waiting for is that final approval from the Special Applications Office. And again, like I mentioned the last time I was here, it's not a matter of not receiving the vouchers, it's just when we'll receive them. In addition to that, you know, like I mentioned, I just want to focus on some of the physical and capital elements of our recovery plan. I was thinking today that we have approached about a year. This time last year, we started our recovery plan in addition to the application for Parkside. And as we report back on our recovery plan, the one thing that I can say is that what I mentioned before about the Housing Authority operating with transparency and a well-oiled machine, we're at that point. We have an absolute dynamic board. We have an absolute dynamic staff, including a contractual accountant that we have who has brought order and policies and procedures to the Housing Authority, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to even the possibility of doing a virtual presentation with him to present, you know, how we have changed, how we have moved from how we've gotten to the point where we are right now. I think that's the easiest way to put it. I think that we have had much success. I know that we just passed our report, but even considering our budget for 2020, and our goal was to, by the end of this year, looking at revenue at $14,300, but at this point we're already $111,000 better than budget. So, I mean, we're moving forward and we're moving fast, and the next meeting, what I do hope to be able to do is provide you with some of the ratios that HUD expects from us on a quarterly basis. Another thing that has happened is that, and as I mentioned before, we have been working on our physical needs assessment for what we call AMP2, that's Westview, and that includes the Westview Apartments that's right across from Sullivan's, Willow Apartments, as well as Douglas Village, which are garden-style apartments on that side of town. And we have had our field work done with that needs assessment. We constructed it in two parts. The first part was to, and as we have talked about before, we knew that we had 3 buildings that were on poor foundations, sinking foundations, and we were able to determine that those 3 buildings, which represent 18 units, are obsolete. And so our next steps would be to begin another Section 18 application for demolition. The difference this time is that we will be looking at redevelopment in that particular space where those 3 buildings are located. But it has been determined by the architects that those 3 buildings are obsolete. In addition, we have a second report that we're waiting on and we should receive in a few weeks, but we have had conversations with the architect, and that is for the remaining 45 buildings. I am, happy to report that those 45 buildings, which represent Willow, Westview, and Douglas Village, are in very sound condition, and our focus now will be improvements. So when we look at improvements, you know, for the exterior, we've already started some roofing, but we know we need to do some concrete and asphalt work, fencing, as well as sidings. Fortunately, we're looking at the fact that with the windows, we may have probably about 5 to 7 more years before we have to replace the windows in that area. In terms of interiors, we know that, you know, in that development, we want to replace all the furnaces. Willow has some issues with basement seepage. We want to respond to that as well. And then we also, and again, staying focused on the fact that our purpose is to provide safe, decent, affordable housing, but it's time to remodel. You know, we're looking at the bathrooms, the kitchens, and updating those particular areas. We need to update appliances and cabinets. And again, we're looking at buildings that were built in 1952. And now is the time, you know, and we know that, you know, people complain, you know, people want to appreciate the quality of life that they're afforded. But now we're at the point where we can begin that process of establishing a solid plan that we're looking at 3 to 5 years in being able to rehab and improve those 46 buildings that we will have remaining. Unless there's any questions, again, those were the only 2 areas that I wanted to focus on.
Chair.
Alderman McClanahan?
Thank you. Thank you, as always, for being here in the presentation. I appreciate it. When you're talking about the recovery plan and working with HUD, and I listened with interest when I heard you talking about the results you're seeing with having the accountant on board and the policies and procedures, and I'm really making some strides in there. Do you feel like you're getting significant headway along with HUD and like positive feedback from HUD in regards to these? How far, if you can even quantify, how far down the recovery plan would you say you're at this point?
You know, I feel like we're right on point with the recovery plan. This TA team that we're working with the Chicago field office, and I'll tell you, with every conversation, we have weekly conference calls. I can't end that conference call without telling them how much we appreciate them. This has been a true partnership where we have worked together. It's not a situation where, and I will say, when I first came to Freeport Housing Authority, it was a battle to get support, you know, but that's a part of transition. The HUD staff has transitioned. I believe that we have a good team, and we've been learning together. And once we establish the goals, we pursue those goals. And I mean, I truly feel like we have received the expertise that public housing authorities should receive when working directly with the field office. So it's not a matter of just receiving direction. It's a matter of receiving confirmation based on, you know, HUD regulations, because we know how sticky regulations can be. You can take it one way or another, but being able to have those conversations for clarity.
Follow?
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I was also listening with interest regarding the Willow, Westview, and Douglas, because 2 of those 3 are in my ward, and the other one touches right up next to my ward. On those, so we knew that there was the issues with the 18 units, and we're getting to that point, and I appreciate the plan you have on that. But if constituents are asking, all those other units, I think you said 45 buildings, the results have come back on those, and while you're going to be doing a significant amount of improvements that you talked about, structurally, foundation, where they're at, location, and everything came back good on that. I think the word used was sound.
Yes, yes. Everything came back, you know, as structurally the buildings are sound, but improvements, yes, are definitely needed. So I think over probably the last maybe 15 years, some projects were done in bits and pieces, like windows here, roofing here, but what we're looking at is a solid plan to make improvements over the entire portfolio, that Westview portfolio.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So just from me, so there's 45 buildings, but and then in addition to the ones that are no longer going to be occupied, how many buildings are there in total?
Total for the Westview development is 49 residential buildings.
Okay.
52 if we count the 52 if we count the non-residential buildings as well.
And that's just in Westview?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought that meant, I misunderstood you. I thought you meant for the entire housing authority, and that seemed low for me.
No, I didn't count the Parkside buildings
Okay.
and units. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time and the follow-through. Just one last question. It was encouraging to hear the vouchers. You said it is a question of when, not if, regarding Floodway.
Exactly. And again, as I mentioned, the field office is going to request an emergency issuance of those vouchers. It's been a long time. This has been like a 1-year process. And what's interesting, but I believe is necessary, is that when you begin this process, you include residents in this process. But in the same vein, you're saying, we are going to relocate you. We're looking at, because of the location, we're going to demolish these units. But a year later, people are, antsy. They're waiting on the vouchers. They're waiting on the support to be able to move forward. So, if that emergency issuance is possible, I do hope it happens. But I really hope that we don't have to go until, through November for them to have to wait.
All right, well, we'll look forward to the updates. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 8. This is a continued discussion of an ordinance amending Chapter 806, the alcoholic liquor sales, to include a downtown festival district, presented by Mr. Mahoney of the Liquor Commission and Attorney Steve Cox.
Evening, everybody. So this is a continued discussion regarding this proposal. And I know that there was some technical glitches that made it so that the revised ordinance you only recently received. So if we need to come back and talk more, we certainly can do that. So we took all the suggestions, ideas, and conversation that we had last time. We put it down into a new ordinance for everyone to take a look at. Some of the highlights, there's one area in particular I know that we're going to have a discussion on tonight. So let's put that one towards the end, and let's talk about some of the other stuff to see if there's anything else we need to have any conversation with. First of all, we solidified the map, and this is all in conjunction with Freeport PD and all of the other department heads that we need to run everything by. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a tail on the map if that got caught on your copy, so that we go down, so that we go down and get to the grocery store that's down there, and we think we pick up everybody. Now, I know one of the conversations that's been had amongst some of the alderpersons is the size of the map. Like I said, everything we do in conjunction with the PD. We obviously wanted to try to include everybody. I mean, we don't want to draw a map that singles somebody out that's not included in the district. The ordinance is written so that it's an opt-out. Somebody can decide that they don't want to participate in any given event. Now, I know some of the conversations that have been had is maybe we don't do the entire district at the first time, or maybe we move portions of it around. We're certainly open to any of those conversations, but as we drew the district, we wanted to include everyone downtown that we possibly could. Secondly, we did double the fines for any type of violation that occurs in the district during the times when the district is being utilized. Those fines would only be ordinance violations. We obviously cannot control a state violation, but the PD has discretion sometimes with certain offenses, whether or not to charge them as a state violation or an ordinance violation. If it's during a period of time when the festival district is being utilized and it's a violation where they could charge it as an ordinance, I would presume that they would, and the fines then would be doubled during that time. And we also are going to have some signage with regards to that particular issue, and clearly signage with regards to the continents of the festival district. We also took your suggestion, Alderman, and had a opt-in situation where if you want the opportunity for people to be able to come into your place of business, I did that right? Into your place of business with, during a period of time when the festival district is in place with an open container, then you put up the sign that says you're okay to have people come in, and it would match with the wristband or the cup, however we're doing that. So if a business wants somebody to be able to come in with an open container, then they would put something up. So rather than an opt-out creating a burden on the business, it would be an opt-in that you're okay with them coming in. If you don't have the sign up with the appropriate color, then anybody would know that their drink has to be finished before they can go into that particular business. Any conversations with regards to those issues before we get to different times and different dates upon which we would do this if it was passed?
Any takers there?
All right, so let's go ahead.
We'll do it all at once.
Okay, so it was made very clear that, especially from Alderperson McClanathan, that specific dates, specific times was something that the city council wanted to get in there. We all got pushback from our respective attorney with regards to that, and so let me give that side of it. We did put down a maximum duration. And the idea that I think Attorney Cox is going to discuss, or I can discuss on his behalf, is if we put it in the ordinance, then if we want to expand it or we can contract it under the written ordinance, because the liquor commissioner has the ability to pull the festival district at any time. So if there's a problem, it can be immediately terminated by the liquor commissioner. But if we want to expand it at all, then we have to come back and we have to write a new ordinance in order to do that if we set out specific times. So that was the pushback from our respective attorney, yours and ours as liquor commissioner, that rather than doing that, create parameters and then allow the liquor commission to set the days and times in order to have the festival district, so that it's something where we don't have to come back and do it. I can tell by the look on Alderman McClanathan's face, he's not excited about that opportunity. So, remember, we work for you guys, so it's however everybody wishes to do that. So Mr. McClanathan and I had the chance to talk before tonight. Us lawyers kind of tend to huddle together. And we talked about maybe setting a number of days for the first go. And the number that we talked about was 6, because that was a number that the Liquor Commission talked about in our meeting, was to look at the Arctic Walk, the wine tasting, the 3 Musics on Chicago, and then Brewfest. So for the first year, do 6, see how that goes, and then kind of go from there. So that was the schedule that we were going to do and implement anyway. I know that there was some concern about just opening it up. Believe me, that's been pulled off the table by us. And again, I'll remind you that everything we do in conjunction with the police department. And remind you, we have 2 former PD on the Liquor Commission, so we're not going to just create all kinds of problems. That's not our intent. So that was one discussion, was to actually put in the ordinance 6 times in the first year, and then assuming that went well and assuming the Liquor Commission was interested in opening that up, then we'd be back here in a year asking for more times. If that's the way that the city council wishes to proceed, then like I said, we work for you guys. So if we were to tell you what our first schedule is going to be, that's what it would be. It would be those 6 dates and see how they go. And by the way, the maximum time isn't the time that we're going to necessarily do. It would just be the maximum time under the ordinance that would be allowed.
One question I have for you is, you named some festivals, and during those, the certain streets are closed down, is it just kind of a per event decision to determine if streets are going to be closed down for this?
Yes, so a lot of this is see how it goes, right? I mean, a lot of this is let's do this and see what works, what doesn't work, if we have a problem, if we don't have a problem. You know, we might do this and decide that it works really well with this event, but doesn't work really well with this event. It might end up that streets need to be closed down, we think. Businesses might not be happy with that, so then that could change. You know, we might be back here going, okay, well, now we want to change this and change the size of the district or change the location of the district. I mean, I think some of this is we got to just kind of go and see what happens. We've done our best to pattern ourselves off of other places that are successful and have done this for a considerable period of time and have had it work. And so that's really what we're going for in terms of how we structured the whole system.
Chair.
Mr. McClanathan?
Thank you. In subsection B, I absolutely do want a limit on the number of times initially, because as written, it sounds absurd, but as written, theoretically, you could do it 365 times in year one, as written, and I can't go along with that. So the proposal in regards to 6 for trying it out, I don't care if you want to tie it into certain events or not, but I mean, I think putting at least really some boundaries on the sandbox, I can live with that.
And I think, by the way, not tying it in with specific events would be a good idea.
Sure.
So that way it gives us a little bit of flexibility, because, you know, we may decide that it's not a good idea. We might do one Music on Chicago and go, you know what, that doesn't really work all that well. So let's not do that on the next 2 Musics on Chicago. Let's try just doing it on its own and see how that works. It would give us a little bit more flexibility, would be my thought.
The other, and we're not gonna be able to hash this out tonight, and as
No,
you said,
that's
we
fine.
only got this early afternoon, so, the only other real concern I have on here is, people come and they apply, they get their permit in regards to it, everybody knows, and you just do the checklist as do you meet these requirements in regards to it, and it moves on. Some of the language that I see in here, again, I'm not gonna get into all of it tonight, let's meet and try to hash this out, but, some of the language on here leaves things like into the discretion of the liquor commission and things of that nature, and I would like to, I'd like to make sure that we just get all the rules and regulations tied up front. And then again, so when you're operating it, someone comes, they go through the process, and it's really largely administrative. I do like the idea of having kind of the emergency cutoff and having it in one person, because you can't call an emergency meeting and say, are we cutting it off, or things of that nature, and so that is good. But that's my feedback for tonight. I'd like the days. I want to tighten up some of the other things, so I feel like when we come out of here, we have something where it's as well structured as a lot of these other events that have, I believe, largely proven to be successful in the past.
You want to address that?
So just a couple of technical notes, and I want to clarify one, Attorney McClanathan's point. Clerk Anderson noted there was an artifact that got left in this, and I didn't want to change it because the recommendation had already come forward from Liquor Commission. But you'll see in, I just add it. In D, the application, this is an artifact from one of the prior incarnations of the ordinance. It's a $50 per season fee that anybody would pay to be a participant in the process. And so that change will be made. And then there is a prohibition in G on temporary licenses. The initial idea on that was to make sure that everybody, even if there was entertainment going on, things like that were happening in the streets, that all of the purchases occurred in licensed establishments. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of partnering with Music on Chicago. So that section will come out at least in the initial incarnation. And then to Attorney McClanathan's point, is it the request that we have just a simple cap on the number of events
For the first year,
for-
I mean, I'm one, of 8 here, but certainly that'd be my preference. Because this is larger in scope than the other things that we've done in the past, which are also limited in the number that generally happen in regards to, so. I'd like to, it's always easier to expand the parameters upon success than it is to put something, back in the box later on, or have significant unanticipated consequences on that. So, yeah, I would like to see a cap for starting out here.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any pushback on that.
I had a follow-up based on that. Can you explain like the process of how one of these events would come into existence with regards, because he said we don't want it to happen every day of the year, but how would one even start to begin with, and how would it get approved?
Great question. So originally, and I think a lot of the festival districts that we patterned this off of have a switch that the liquor commissioner throws and says, okay, well, we're doing it this weekend. That's what Champaign does, which is what this is strongly patterned after. After a lot of discussion, for marketing purposes, for just the sake of keeping everybody on the same page and understanding when these events were going to occur, the way that the ordinance is currently structured is that the Liquor Commission will set a calendar, just like every other calendar that we set, every other commission, every other committee sets its own calendar. A calendar would be drafted and presented sometime, spring. I guess for the Arctic Ale Walk, it would have to be sooner than that, but would be established and kept on file with the clerk's office, so that there would be, a set date and a set number of these things that would be established well in advance. And the idea there, again, is so that people can make plans around that, both from a local attendance standpoint. You could have posters up at local establishments, or for purposes of the website and advertising to a broader audience to attract tourism.
So if I understand that right, groups would come to the Liquor Commission to present the idea, and then it would be, well, I'm getting lost here of where it initially gets approved.
Well, actually, we're the ones that would set the schedule. So the Liquor Commission itself would set the schedule. So one of the reasons we can't give you a schedule now is because we don't know when Music on Chicago is going to happen next year. We don't know specifically when Brewfest is going to happen next year. But the Liquor Commission, we would talk to our licensees. We would talk to the people who want to do, maybe the partnership doesn't want it to be open, and so we would talk to the people that are putting on these events, and then we would set the schedule as to when the festival district would in fact be lit up. So somebody could ask us if it could be lit up at this particular event, but it would be up to the Liquor Commission as to when that would happen.
That answers my question, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Sure.
Mr. McClanathan?
Thank you. How have the other communities and municipalities, either through their insurance agencies or otherwise, handled what I would assume would be the increased liability at one of these events?
Well, so if you are serving, then you're still serving in your establishment, and so your dram shop liability is already going to cover that. Municipalities have a great deal of immunity, and so you don't have a ton of liability if somebody falls on a sidewalk or does those type of things. I mean, if something like that were to happen. And remember, voluntary intoxication is also an assumption of the risk. So I mean, we require a pretty good amount of liability insurance because you got a plaintiff lawyer sitting on the Liquor Commission. So there's a lot of coverage there, but quite frankly, there isn't a tremendous amount of liability that a city has for creating some sort of situation like this. If you get to a point where you have significant crowds, which quite frankly, I look forward to that, challenge. So if you go to Vegas, if you go to some of these other areas, Nashville that we've talked about, they've had to end up creating space for people around corners, because somebody might have got bumped out into a street. So that type of thing can happen down the road, but I think we're a long way from anything like that. So in terms of liability, I mean, a municipality is pretty limited.
Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Meisek.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to put this together and make the adjustments as we had talked about. Hearing about the opportunities that this may provide for tourism and so forth, and then also recognizing the liability that is inherent with the alcohol, and I think really testing out this map and really seeing how well that can be patrolled and so forth. And I do remember Chief Summers talking about this a little bit on the risks of managing this large of a section. I think it is a larger section than we've looked at in past events. That I agree with Alderman McClanathan of having a set number of dates, and would look forward to seeing some recommendations from the Liquor Commission on those specific events. I think the 6 that you had mentioned seem to make sense as a good starting point, so I would support that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I did have a question.
Sure.
Not to cut you off. The $50 fee is a per season fee for licensees. Why not per event?
I think just in terms of financial burden, I mean, everybody, the $50 fee is designed to cover costs for the city to create the cups or the wristbands, the signs, things like that. I don't think it's designed to be a significant revenue stream. You're hoping revenue stream comes from sales tax and from other things. So I think it's just designed to cover costs. And, especially now with everybody coming out of everything that we're all coming out of, then that's why we kept it to a little bit lower number. Plus, we want participation, right? We want people to opt in and hopefully participate in this. We're hoping businesses participate in this in addition to just the ones that sell liquor. And we can't control that. So I think the idea is to just have it just cover costs.
Manager Bucus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear you correctly that the city will be providing the wristbands and cups?
I think wristbands, not cups.
Okay, because I didn't see that in the ordinance. Okay, thank you.
That's been the idea that we had. That way they're uniform. I mean, we could have the licensees provide them, but then we don't know that they're necessarily going to be uniform, and we want to have, the same color for each event. So that way so the police officers know that tonight is purple, and the people that own businesses downtown know that tonight is purple, and so if you don't have the purple wristband, then it's not going to count. And let's say that this expands. Let's say that we do, sometime from now, after everything has gone incredibly smoothly and successfully, we're back and we decide to go a couple of nights in a row. We do something on a Friday and on a Saturday. Well, we got to have different wristbands for each night so that we're sure we don't have people repeating, and we've got the right wristbands in the right hands. And because remember, you get a wristband from a licensee, which means they've been licensed and approved, and they've been certified, so they know how to take your license and make sure that you're legal, make sure that you're not overly intoxicated, all those different things.
Anything else for us, gentlemen?
No, I very much appreciate everybody's willingness to talk about this and think about moving forward on it. 6 times the first year is great, and I think it'd be a good idea if they weren't necessarily specified in case specific event. We decided to try to go in a different direction with that. I think some of this is learning. I mean, the first Brewfest was very successful, but we also learned a lot with the first Brewfest. I mean, we changed locations over time. I mean, the first wine tasting was also very successful, but we also learned a lot as we did that. And we anticipate the same with this. If we're allowed to move forward with it, if we're all allowed to move forward with it, I'm sure that there'll be some things where we look at and go, okay, this could be improved, but this worked. And flexibility in order to manage that would be great. But I just appreciate everybody thinking about it and considering it and giving us feedback so that we can try to bring in an ordinance that everybody can consider.
Thank you. So with that being said, we'll need a motion to move this to the next committee of the whole meeting. So I'm going to make that motion to move this to the next committee of the whole meeting for discussion. And the amendments mentioned, I think, paragraph D, G, and addition of the limits. And I'd also ask that, I was going to ask to have the police chief present for potential questions about their position on that. So that would be my motion. I know that was lengthy, but.
I'd second that.
So, motion by me, seconded by McClanathan. Do we need a voice vote? Yes. Or we can use a voice vote, not a roll call. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's going to be moved on to the next committee of the whole meeting, which will be in November. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, that brings us to item D, which is the discussion regarding the BYOB regulation with, presented by Director Hines and Steve Cox.
Okay, so we discussed a few weeks back a potential petition, or a petition for a special use for a meeting hall regulation, or for a meeting hall. And so we didn't have in place any regulations currently on meeting halls. We didn't have any definitions, and so really no guidance as to how that would be regulated. And we have had issues in the past with meeting halls, and so we brought this forward to you tonight to be able to form those regulations and have some sort of peace of mind, I guess, to allow meeting halls. So the meeting hall regulation, it would require a license in order to operate as a meeting hall, where it's a permitted use or a special use if approved. There is a $100 fee for meeting hall license, as listed in this regulation. There is insurance required as part of the meeting hall license as well, and site requirements that would require the facility to meet all existing code regulations, including zoning and building, fire, et cetera. And adequate off-street parking would be required. There are certain prohibited activities that we have listed here, so including food being served on the premises, unless applicable with the Stevenson County Health Department requirements. No liquor shall be served or brought onto the premises, whether for sale or personal consumption, except in strict accordance with the liquor ordinance, chapter 806, and no gambling or wagering. And the licensee or any of its owners, employees, or agents shall commit any act which constitutes a violation of the codified ordinances. We did include some exceptions in this, since that would include any 501c3 organizations. They would not be required to get this meeting hall license. Property owned or leased by a governmental unit or political subdivision. Property owned or leased by a church or religious organization, and the principal place of any business when conducting meetings held in space normally occupied by such business in its day-to-day operations and furthering the principal purpose of such business. So this, the meeting hall license regulation, it was, Planning Commission last week had recommended approval to council after reviewing this along with the BYOB license that Attorney Cox will go over. Were there any questions on that right now?
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Brashaw.
thank you. So if somebody, say, wants to open a meeting hall, such as somebody that's been here before, and they want to do the BYOB, they must pay two separate fees, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the definitions of meeting hall, and they're pretty broad. So how would a resident having people over at their house not fall into meeting hall definition here? That's my concern.
So it's for rent, lease, donate, or otherwise. So it is pretty broad, but the idea is that that it would fall under commercial or for-profit locations, and that it would exclude residential.
Under the definitions? 'Cause I don't see that in there.
Yes, if it's not clear, then we can go back and,
Well, I might be looking at an older printout. And where was that definition you said, or the exception you said?
Well, we can go back and revise that to include better language that would make sure that that's excluded or more clarified.
Okay.
Chair,
Ms. Brashaw?
I believe her definition was under 857.02, but I don't see that it excludes residences.
So I see in the definition, it's basically made available for persons who are not owners or lessees of the subject premises. But I would hope that we could make it a little more defined to avoid any conflict there with residential, just your typical gatherings of friends and family at a home,
Yeah, of course.
which is obviously not what this is intended or directed at.
Mhm.
Any other questions at this time?
Sure.
Mr. McClanathan?
So, either to director or to Attorney Cox, play out the process in regards to this, and also what current entities do we have that this would now cover that maybe might not have been covered, obviously wasn't covered in the past?
So existing meeting halls. I'm blanking.
Masonic?
So the Masonic Temple actually would fall under. Oh, okay. The Masonic Temple would potentially fall under as a meeting hall. In the Stevenson County Farm Bureau. Thank you. I'm drawing a blank.
Unless they would fall under the exception as a 501c.
Yeah. So if the Farm Bureau is a 501c3, I'm not entirely sure if they are. Then they would be exempt. But the Farm Bureau as it operates, if it were a for-profit business, then they would be a meeting hall.
From what, follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
From what I recall, the intent of some of the discussion was to set up, it was really to, to try to prohibit having entities in place where there wasn't some type of checks and balances, oversight, things could get out of control. Suddenly we're having places pop up that are a drain on the resources of the PD. How does this accomplish that without catching a bunch of organizations that, don't really have the type of activities that we're worried about in regards to that, but still might be meeting somewhat at a meeting hall? Where's the line on that? Where's the balance on that?
That is a good question. So, I think that requiring this meeting hall license across the board for businesses who operate in a similar way is fair. And I think that both with the Liquor Commission's recommended approval and the Planning Commission's recommended approval, that they had agreed on that it would cover each business that's operating as to either rent out or lease out their space.
Steve?
Let me take a shot at that.
Sure.
So the idea, this is really in two pieces, right? There's the meeting hall piece of it, and then there's the BYOB regulation. What Ms. Hines just covered was just the meeting halls. And the idea there is if you've got a room for hire of any type that's not accepted out, and Mr. Borneman, you're absolutely correct. There's an exception, which is in the BYOB piece, which we'll get, which somehow got left out of that definition. So that needs to get back in for private residents. But the idea is if you're renting a room out for hire, we've got one set of concerns, and that is you're up to code. We've inspected it, and you're playing by all the rules that all other licensees have to play by. In other words, we've got the fire inspector in there. We know that it's safe for occupancy by large numbers of people, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole nother set of circumstances that comes into play when there's liquor involved. And that's just kind of a segue into this next piece, which is the BYOB regulation. Currently, we have no regulation on BYOB. The Liquor Control Act doesn't cover it, so arguably you could have you know, a social club or somewhere like that where large numbers of people are gathering and drinking just like a bar and have the same kind of problems as you have with a bar, but with no oversight, none. In fact, with that type of environment, you run the risk of PD not being able to even access it because it's private party, et cetera. So the BYOB piece of this is, it's separate from but not from the meeting hall piece of it. It's addressing a concern that we have with this type of establishment, and that is, if you are profiting essentially from the consumption of alcohol on your premises, you need to comply with all of the rules that bars need to comply with. And you'll see that the changes here are relatively sparse to the liquor code because the liquor code takes care of most of our problems. So the trick is to treat somewhere where you're bringing alcohol in and charging for a room, or otherwise profiting from the consumption of alcohol, bring those in line and require the same sorts of safety protocols as you have with bars. Case in point, one of the provisions here provides that if you carry in liquor for personal consumption, that's okay. We're not prohibiting that. But as soon as you give that to somebody else, at that point you're in violation. So the idea is, okay, we have a wedding reception, and there's certainly probably a market need for this where a family can bring in their own alcohol and allow that to be served to guests at no charge. But you can imagine if there's just an open bar where everybody can just go grab liquor. That's a terrible, terrible situation. So the ordinance provides that if you're going to do that, if it's not purely personal consumption, you're going to have a Bassett-trained server there that's distributing things, just like you would at a bar. And it's designed to build in those safety protocols. So, long answer to Councilman Fanafin's inquiry there. What we're trying to do is address two separate things. One is take a very light touch to just meeting halls, but make sure, again, that we're up to code because we have large numbers of people that are gathering there, and we do have public health, safety concerns there. But if you're not serving liquor, there's a whole set of problems that you don't have. And that's where the BYOB piece of this comes in. And note that the way that the BYOB section is legislated here is it actually creates a small carve-out where it is not legal to bring your own. Because right now, it's always legal to bring your own. So the way that this is defined is it creates a small circumstance if you are a meeting hall, room for hire, or a social club. Then at that point, you can't allow people to bring liquor onto the premises unless you're licensed. That's what triggers the licensing. So it's a little counterintuitive in terms of how that actually works, but that's necessary in order to substantiate the need for the license.
So I'm gonna, you mentioned licensing. Tier 5, this is that carve-out you were talking about?
Yes. So what this does is it just creates a new liquor license, which is the BYOB license. And once you're a license holder, you're a licensee, capital L, licensee under the liquor code. So all those provisions of 806 and 608 in the code come into play. So now you have to, you're treated like a bar at that point. But with the same carve-outs as Ms. Hines mentioned for accepted entities, and that's 501Cs, don't need to do that. If you're a church, you don't need to do that. Governmental entities, you don't need to do that. Private residents, you don't need to do that. And businesses in the ordinary course of their business, as long as they don't charge for rent. So that's intended to exclude as widely as possible social gatherings where this sort of thing is regularly done. You know, we don't want to interfere with anybody's private behavior, but what we want to do is make sure that we're regulating establishments which are profiting from the consumption of liquor on the premises, just like a bar.
You have a question?
Just a comment, I think. Personally, I think I need to wrap my hands around it even a little more. I thought I had a certain level of understanding of it, but I wanna track this down, but I also wanna keep this on track too. So I do wonder in regards to, I understand why with the tier 5, you know, the fee for the license on that. I do wonder whether the $100 fee is necessary for the meeting hall portion, but that's something I gotta think over, I think a little bit more. But- Go ahead.
If I could address that, the idea is you can have one without the other.
Sure.
So you could theoretically have a meeting hall without the BYOB piece of it, that's just $100 a year. You could also have BYOB without the meeting hall, you could be a social club or something like that, so.
I'm just thinking, what's the public policy for having a fee for just the generic meeting hall, but it's just, I don't know, I'll think about it some more.
Chair.
Ms. Brashaw?
I think one of the charges, the $100 per year would help cover some of the costs for the police and fire to go in and analyze the business to see if it's safe for capacity, for the numbers of capacity, for the city to monitor, you know, things that they need to do for any business. There are often charges. Costs of doing business is how I look at it, but I'd be in support of the $100 for per year is a very small charge. The
Chair.
reason they purchased that business was to make a profit, excuse me.
Yeah. Mr. McClanathan?
Aren't we already inspecting these buildings on a either annual or every other year basis? At least, isn't that the goal? I suppose I should ask Chief.
Yes.
Well,
He's on the other side of the pillar.
oh, gotcha. Well, I would say that one of the concerns I have from an enforcement standpoint is you could be a meeting hall or a social club and not licensing those things means that maybe they don't even need to come forward. There's no real need for them to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm here. By adding this provision, it's really the idea with the meeting halls is to make sure that we know where we potentially have large gatherings of people and just make sure that they're safe. Again, fire code, that's my number one, just to make sure that they're, you know, we don't have a disastrous situation where somebody's holding a big public gathering in the basement of an old building with only one exit.
I did have another question. Recently, not recently, but since I've been on council since May, we covered an ordinance regarding, I think it was Airbnbs or residential homes that can be rented out for parties. So would somebody who had that type of property in Freeport now need to get a BYOB license? Or was that already covered under the liquor code?
So the BYOB would be a separate function from the rooming houses. And really, the rooming house would fall separately from the meeting hall, I think, just by way of the definition. I think that's a great point. And I'll double check and just make sure that we don't step on those definitions somewhere. But I think that the rooming house is a different, in bed and breakfast establishment, that's gonna fall under a separate definition. And the other point is we are addressing the definition of meeting hall in the zoning code as well. That just requires a public hearing. We're doing that at next month, which is a small tweak, but we can, just to make sure that meeting halls don't include B&Bs, that's probably a really good add.
Okay. I just recall us covering an issue with regards to catering and preparing food on site for like residential places that are rented out for weddings or something like that.
So that was our very large property. So if you had over 5 acres and you were in a state district, so that would fall under that would be a meeting hall situation, because that was a zoning definition, but and that would all still stick. They would just this would pick them up as well.
Okay. So at this point, what is the request from you two for this ordinance, I guess, and then I will ask if there's any motions.
I think the idea is to move this forward to council and approve. It's been vetted by Liquor Commission and Planning Commission, and it comes up with their recommendation. think we do need to make that one adjustment to make sure that the residential exception makes its way in the meeting halls as well as the BYOB.
All right, thank you. And at this point, council, if there's no other questions, looking for a motion of some kind to deal with item 10 here.
So Alderman,
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair?
Yep.
So Alderman McClathan had a couple of suggestions for edits on this too, or you wanted some time to review?
Let's just move it, we can move it on to next week's meeting. That's plenty of time to
Okay.
find out, and I can make any recommendations, if any, at that point.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Brashaw.
I'll make a motion to move this forward to the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
All right, that was a motion to move this forward to, that would be next week, correct? Next meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Parker. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? So that will move forward on unanimously. Thank you for the presentation, you two. And then that brings us to item 11, which is discussion regarding an ordinance amending Chapter 242 Fire Department, Section 24210G, probationary period, and Chapter 240 Police Department, Section 240.09G, probationary period of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Freeport, presented by Chief Liggett.
Good evening. I'm presenting this evening on some amendments that we needed to make to the ordinance. Just a little background, in August of 2019, the City of Freeport passed an ordinance change that modified the city's ordinance on residency and some other things that impacted the Police and Fire Commission rules. What we did then, worked with the Police and Fire Commission attorney, John Broiler, and asked him to amend the rules and regulations, incorporate the changes from the ordinance into the document, and fix any formatting issues that we had. There were several things that John discovered and that needed to be corrected, and this orders fix one conflict between the rules and the city ordinance. The commission recommended approval of this amendment to the ordinance at their regularly scheduled meeting. Discussion on the change revolves around the probationary period and the extension of that probationary period. Prior rules allowed for the discretion of the chief to extend the probationary period, and under the state law, the chief can recommend that extension with the approval of commission. So that's what this changes in the ordinance to fix that. If you don't have any questions, that's all I have to report on this option.
Any questions?
Chair?
Mr. McClanahan.
Thank you. I understood the striking out and looking at section 2 of the ordinance. If you have the ordinance in front of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Section 2, subparagraph G. I understand you struck out the portion about 6 months at the discretion of the chief. Section 3, though, references upon the request of the chief of police, and for good cause shown relating to performance an officer's probationary term. Is that how you intended this? Was it addressing both departments, or?
That is what it's titled.
What's that?
The section 242 pertains to the fire department, and section 240.09 pertains to the police department in the ordinance, the way I understand it.
Right. Okay, so just on the 242.10G, solely striking out and said probationary period may be extended by up to 6 months at the discretion of chief, that gets you what you need here?
Yes, absolutely, because if you look at the following sentence, it says, before the expiration of such probationary period, the chief shall make a written recommendation stating the reasons of the board for continuation or discharge of the probationary member. So it's handled by approval.
Just taking out your discretion on
Yep.
that is sufficient, coupled with the rest of it. Okay.
Yep.
That's fine. And obviously, we have the addition in for the police there on the next one, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Chair,
Ms. Brashaw,
are we looking tonight to move this forward to the next council meeting?
I would assume so.
Yes, please.
I would like to make that motion, sir.
Second.
That was Brashaw with the first, and Parker jumped in there with the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Parker.
And none opposed, so that will move to the next council meeting for first reading. And Chief Liggett, we have you for discussion item 12, which is an ordinance regarding amending various sections of Chapter 242, the Fire Department, and Chapter 1640, Bureau of Fire Prevention of the ordinances of the City of Freeport to reorganize the Fire Department.
I'm bringing before you this evening a proposal to do a minor reorganization in the department. And the department went through a reorganization in 2018. The department implemented 2 40-hour deputy chief positions, one for operations and one for administration. The incumbent for the deputy chief administration retired on October 9th. Since beginning as the chief of the department, I've been examining the department operations and processes where I may be able to develop some financial efficiency. Regarding discussion, the Deputy Chief of Administration was named in the existing ordinance as a highly specialized position and requires specific skill set for the assigned duties. In my professional opinion, the nature of the work and the supervisory responsibilities don't require a Deputy Chief level position. The primary responsibilities for this include public fire and injury prevention, plan review, fire inspection, complaint fire inspections, code interpretation, fire inspection records management, fire origin and cause investigation, arson investigation, free smoke detector program, business and medical Knox box program, public information officer, and then a support agency liaison for non-governmental agencies that we work with. This position needs to remain an exempt supervisor, and I would like to propose that it be the equivalent to a district chief level. As the result of the specialist nature of these job duties, I'm submitting an ordinance change to eliminate the deputy chief of administration and create a position of fire marshal. This reorganization is not bringing back the old fire inspector position. We are maintaining the exempt fire chief officer status of the deputy chief, but retitling it and lowering the pay grade to be commensurate with the duties. This creates some nominal savings for the city and allows us to maintain the executive control of these critical duties. The Freeport Fire Department responds, the other thing that we need to consider is, could these duties be assigned to someone else? I'm proposing that the fire marshal position needs to be funded because we're not able to delegate this work to other folks. The fire department responds to over 5,400 emergencies each year. Myself and my deputy chief of operations would not have enough time in our day to commit to these tasks. And with the workload of emergencies, training, station equipment maintenance, distributing this workload to the rest of the team would be mission failure. And it can't be delegated to the 24-hour staff. The Deputy Chief of Administration was created to increase accountability with fire prevention functions. In the final year of the fire inspector, a total of 91 fire inspections were completed. Since the Deputy Chief of Administration began to supervise this work, we've increased our annual inspections to over 600. My goal as fire chief is to get into every business once a year and every high hazard occupancy at least twice a year. Our current operational modality, we've been able to get into about half of our businesses each year. The fire marshal position is absolutely critical to this goal. And I would like to have this as an appointed specialist position, which this ordinance does, as a highly technical craft, and the person selected for this position needs to be a trained specialist. We have personnel within the department that meet the criteria we will need and can move into this position through an appointment. If we do this through a promotional process, I get the high score, not always the most qualified person. So that's why I'm looking to make it a specialist position. So with your assistance and any questions, I'd appreciate moving this forward for consideration at the next council meeting.
Chair,
Brashaw?
thank you. The person you have in mind, do they have the credentials for this position already, or do they need to go to school?
There is training available. There are Fire Inspector 1, Fire Inspector 2, Public Safety Educator, Fire Arson Investigator, Fire Investigator, Arson Investigator, 2 separate classes. And we do have folks in the department that have those credentials.
Thank you, sir. One more question, if I may.
Yes.
Will this person still remain active firefighter?
Yes,
Thank you, sir. So it won't take away from our numbers?
that's correct.
I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Misick?
So this fire marshal position, as developing into this position, is there any additional opportunities within the position to increase in rank or increase in training to provide further value?
I may not understand the question. For that person to advance within the department, to become
Yes.
a deputy chief or chief of the department? Absolutely. I'm an example of that. I was the deputy chief of fire prevention, different titles, same rank level, okay? In Beloit, I had deputy chief, assistant chief, chief. Here we have district chief, deputy chief, chief. So different titles, same level. But I did that work in the Beloit Fire Department and advanced through the ranks to eventually be chief. So if you look at many of our chiefs and the selection of chief officers throughout the United States, many of them begin with prevention backgrounds. Community risk reduction is a huge deal for communities. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at with this new position is Vision 2020. Vision 2020 is a fire prevention modality. Basically, it's a community-wide engagement in community risk reduction. We do a hazard analysis. We develop programs and prevention strategies based on that analysis. So this position will be critical to that. And then that interaction translates into contacts and relationships and business development, working directly with Ben and community development on advancing public safety in the city. So there's a high potential for this individual to eventually be chief of the department.
Follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So within this position, I know that the position hasn't been filled yet. What percentage of time would you expect for the true fire marshal activities versus firefighting activities?
Well, we probably we respond to about 40 structure fires a year. So it's going to be an important role for this person to respond. They'll be a command aide. They will be assisting us with dealing with family members. They're going to be conducting the fire investigation. They're going to be doing a lot of on-scene work, but it won't be the majority of their work. The majority of their work will be the plan review, building plan reviews, fire inspections, occupancy inspections with Ben, complaint inspections that we have, all of our documentation, record keeping, of course, and then pre-planning. That's one thing I didn't have on the list, pre-planning our businesses for response. So it'll be a busy position, there's no doubt about it.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Parker, go ahead.
His hours are gonna be like Monday through Friday and then on call 24/7?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Chair?
Mr. McClanathan?
Thank you. I appreciate that you say basically the duties that The duties currently of the deputy chief of administration don't require a deputy chief level of that as to how we have it here currently. Talk to me, what are the differences between what we previously had with the fire? Because when we went to that deputy chief administration, one of the reasons why we said we don't need a fire inspector position is because those duties and responsibilities can get subsumed elsewhere, largely in deputy chief of administration. What are the differences between the duties of the prior position of fire inspector and the proposed position of fire marshal?
I don't believe the prior inspector had the supervisory responsibilities that the current deputy chief of administration would have.
Supervisory responsibilities like what?
Supervising the lieutenants on fire inspections, supervising, working, I know that person had to work with the building inspector on inspections and things like that. But the breadth of responsibility was much less than what we are incorporating and engaging moving forward for the fire department.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
You mentioned 91 inspections versus 600. Is that more a result of, you had a person whose job was fire inspections, like period.
Mm-hmm.
So, the change in that is more of, it's a credit to the emphasis on the department, not necessarily the position.
There are several reasons that we increased our numbers of inspections. Some of that is assignment and holding accountability the company officers for company fire inspections. Also, the formation of a good business list, location list of businesses in the city of Freeport. There were times when we would go to a business that had never been inspected because it wasn't on our list. So there was a lot of change that occurred very quickly in a very short period of time to create that accountability.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
Currently, we don't just, currently you send out 3 or 4 or 5 individuals to go to an inspection, don't you? You don't just send out the deputy chief, correct?
The deputy chief does do individual inspections, yes. He did have responsibility for doing that, and he worked with Ben on the occupancy inspections and complaint inspections. Code interpretations, obviously the deputy chief did that, working with Ben and then also the city attorney. And then the companies would go out, the engine companies would go out, and typically that is 4 individuals at Station 1 and Station 2. At Central Fire Station, it would be 2 individuals. And the officer would be responsible for that fire inspection.
Follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Office of the State Fire Marshal offers fire investigation and arson investigation services to municipalities on an as-needed basis at no charge to the municipality, don't they?
They do. Their availability is questionable. There's 7 agents for the entire state of Illinois. So for our 35 fires, I don't know that we would be able to get them for every one of our fires.
Follow up?
Yes.
Out of the 35, and I think earlier you said 40, so the 35 to 40
Yeah.
fires a year, what percentage of those rise significantly to the level that requires an investigation?
All of them.
Approximately, okay.
All of them. On a very minor fire, let's say we have a child playing with some leaves in the yard that sets the yard on fire, a company officer can complete that investigation. They pass that information on to the fire investigator, and the fire investigator drafts the report.
Finally, out of the surrounding, let's take, obviously I assume, and you said Beloit, and I assume Rockford just because of their size, but taking the rest of Stevenson County, Joe Davies County, Carroll County, Ogle County, how many other municipalities have a commensurate position that is staffed by an individual as opposed to either working with the state fire marshal or delegating the duties out throughout the department?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Are you
I
aware
don't-
of any?
Pardon me?
Are you aware of any?
Well,
Off the top of your head?
yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So my question is, and forgive me for my lack of understanding in the fire department here, but this would take, you would appoint somebody who is currently a firefighter to this position?
That's correct.
And they would no longer...
Or lieutenant.
And in this position, when they responded to a fire, it would be in an investigative nature?
Initially, they may be supporting the direct operations of the firefighting. They could be in a tank. They could be interior assisting at the district chief level with the response. They could be a sector officer, they could be the safety officer for the firefight. And then as the emergency is brought under control, they would enter and continue to conduct those additional functions, those support functions.
So my next question was going to be, how would this not take away from our numbers of strictly firefighters, who I consider to be those who show up in the truck and, fight the fire? And like I said, forgive me for my lack of understanding here.
We would hire someone, a firefighter at the bottom, and make the appropriate promotions depending on who is appointed to the position. And then this position obviously is replacing an FTE that already exists in the budget. So we are at zero change from a response capacity perspective.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions at this point, this is up for discussion today. We'd be looking for a motion to move this forward to a meeting or to the next committee for further discussion. So at this point, I'm open for motions.
Chair,
Ms. Brashaw.
I'll make a motion to move this forward to the next council meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion to move forward to the council meeting by Ms. Bradshaw, seconded by Mr. Misick. Any more discussion? Without any more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that will move forward to the next council meeting.
Thank you very much.
Chief.
I appreciate it.
Yep. All right, that brings us to item 13, discussion regarding extending contract for Whipfly for auditing services. Manager Brevis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in 2018, we went out for proposals to provide for audit services for the city's finance department. And Klein Hall was selected for a 3-year period. Since that time, Klein Hall and Whipfly have merged into Whipfly. The contract was for 3 fiscal years, and with our completion of our audit for December 31st, 2019, Whipfly fulfilled the initial RFP for the city of Freeport. With the changes we're making in the finance department at the present time, with the implementation of new software, which includes a complete code revision, and I mean, we're redoing all our account numbers and everything. It would be very beneficial if we kept our current auditor, who kind of has previous experience with us and how our structure is set up and the procedures we go through. In addition, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends that when you hire an auditor, you hire them for at least a 5-year period, and we've only hired them for 3 years. So we're looking, as staff's recommending, I'm recommending that we proceed and hire Whipfly for another 3 years. The proposed cost for fiscal year 2020 would be $36,800. For fiscal year 2021, it'd be $37,700. And for fiscal year 2022, it'd be $38,600. So basically a $900 increase each year. And as I stated before, staff's recommending that council move this forward and approve it at the next city council meeting.
Chair,
Yes.
thank you. Manager Bucus, I'm not opposed to this at all, but I just wanted to ask the question. Is this the average cost that other firms are charging at this time if we did an RF?
They were the lowest when we went out 3 years ago, and a couple of, I would say by quite a bit to the next lowest bidder or proposal. It was quite a bit of money.
So you believe if we went for another request for proposal for other companies, this would be in line with that?
I thought this was within line with what we are asking for, especially since our last full fiscal year from 2019 was $34,900. It's less than a $2,000 increase. And in fiscal year 2019B, because of all the changes they had to make, it was a little higher. But the original contract would have been $38,000. So we are actually, I thought, we saw a little bit of a decrease from the prior year.
Okay,
Because
Chair,
they do have experience with us.
Chair, may I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Manager, because I was just a little confused here when I was looking at the actual, the FY 2018 was 32,625, FY 2019 34,950, and then FY 2019B 40,650. Did we pay for FY 2019 both of those amounts, or just the additional amount between the differences?
For fiscal year 2019B, we paid them $40,650.
Because that was the 8-month?
It was 8 months, and they had to reprogram all their formulas.
I see. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to complain or anything. I just was a little awkward in understanding the fact that it was 8 months and yet it was quite a bit more money.
They had to do
So
a lot
that's
more
why I'm
work.
asking that question, and also the fact that 2019 was listed twice, so I wasn't sure on those amounts.
Right, 2019 was our full fiscal year. It started in April of 2018 and started May 1st of 2018 and concluded on April 30th, 2019. And then 2019B budget was from May 1st of 2019 through December 31st, 2019.
Thank you for clarifying that. It would have been a little bit easier to understand if I had those dates in front of me. So thank you for explaining that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Chair.
Mr. McClanathan.
Thank you. Given that we did the it's professional services, so I think it was discretionary in regards to whether you need to do the RFP, and you did the RFP less than 2 years ago, or less than 3 years ago. And the familiarity, the locality, and things of that nature, on the prices that are proposed here, I would move that we put this forward to the next city council meeting for approval.
Motion by Mr. McClanathan to move this forward.
Second.
Seconded by Mysick. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That will move forward. All right, item 14 is the discussion regarding Oak Hill, Hillcrest, Sullivan Court project funding options. Manager Bucus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, we talked briefly about the Oak Hill sanitary sewer program and trying to get services to a couple individuals whose septic systems were failing. This was moved to this committee meeting. Staff is currently investigating how we might be able to fund this project. We did contact the IEPA, or we can contact, I said we haven't contacted them yet, about trying to add this project to our facility plan, which would put us as part of the revolving loan fund project. Best case scenario would be to get this included in next cycle, which would be July 1st of 2021 to June 30th, 2022. The current loan terms would be 1% for 20 years, and depending on the timing of the project, we may be eligible up to a 40% principal forgiveness. This will be at the same time we're looking at doing the wastewater treatment plant and the Adams Avenue projects, and there is a limit on how much the EPA will forgive on a sewer project. So we may or may not get a 40% forgiveness. We're also looking at an IEPA unsewered communities construction grant program. It appears this may be eligible. We have to double check the moderate to low income housing income requirements. The applications are open, currently are open and are due by December 31st. Where we have to contact the IEPA to clarify what track, census tract this falls into and whether it'd be eligible. And if we are awarded a grant for this program, we will receive it in March 2021. So what staff's recommending right now is that the council allow us to look at various funding options and report back to you at either a committee of the whole or at the full city council meeting, depending on the timing.
Any discussion?
Chair,
Ms. Brashaw?
thank you. Manager Bucus, when are you thinking that we could have some more information on this at a COW meeting?
We'll try up to next month.
I would make a motion that we reschedule this again for the agenda next month.
I'll second that. So that was Ms. Brashaw, seconded by myself. Let's move this to the COW meeting next month. Any discussion? With that being said, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed? Hearing none, that'll be moved to the committee of the whole next month. That moves us to item 15, which is public comment, agenda or non-agenda items. Unless there was some submitted electronically, I don't believe we have any. And that will move us to item 16, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Clanathan and myself, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. I can vote on things.